Well, awesome. Well, thanks you guys coming for this is called Jesus Calms the Storm. Kind of excited because I wasn't sure where we were going to end up, and from here on out, it looks like I think we're going to be in the Gospels for sure, and unless otherwise. But yeah. So welcome to the Sea of Galilee, and that's where we're at right now. And it's a freshwater lake, and it's about 13 miles long and 8 miles wide, and they say it's shaped like an upside down teardrop, and it's actually the second lowest body of water on Earth after the Dead Sea, which is interesting if you like that kind of stuff. And it's surrounded by hills and mountains, including the Golan Heights, and if you read the Bible quite often, you'll hear that language. But it's a beautiful place, and I've never been, but it's prone to sudden storms, and for centuries it's been a key fishing spot because of its abundant fish. And so actually some of Jesus's first followers were fishermen. I'm a fisherman myself. I love fly fishing. I like fishing, so I can relate to this. I know Mrs. Wolf is good at fishing in virtual reality, maybe real life too, and he enables. And so Jesus, he actually preached along the shores. And as crowds grew, and he even taught from boats. And life on this lake hasn't changed much since the time of Jesus. And these fishermen still work long nights hauling nets. And it was a rough job. Being a fisherman out here was a lot of work. And so during this time, Herod, he controlled the industry, and the tax brokers left fishermen with little profit. And still fishing was essential for survival. And so after leaving Nazareth, Jesus settled to Capernaum, a quiet fishing town on the lake's northern shore. And what's interesting, instead of starting his ministry in Jerusalem by the temple, he began here, teaching in synagogues, homes, and hillsides. And so one Sabbath, Peter, James, and John were cleaning their nets in a prime fishing spot. Jesus called them to follow him, and that moment changed their lives forever. And so I'm going to go ahead and read the scripture behind me. And it says, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. And at once they left their nets and they followed him. And when he had gone a little further, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat preparing their nets. And without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men, and they followed him. I'm going to get out of this water before I drown. And so Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, they each share Jesus' story from their own perspective. And so it's different accounts, but together they tell the same message. And so Mark's gospel, that's what we're in, is based on Peter's testimony, and it's written in a way that connects with the Romans and the Gentile readers. And Luke's account was influenced by Paul's testimony and adds extra details, I think, often to the story. And these different viewpoints, they don't conflict, but instead they give us a deeper and fuller understanding of Jesus's life and ministry. So let's just dive into real quick, and I'm going to read it real quick, into Luke's account, because I think there's just a little more detail in it. And it says in Luke 5:1 through 11, one day as Jesus was standing by the lake Gennesaret, which was the Sea of Galilee, the people were crowding around him and listening to the word of God. And he saw at the water's edge 2 boats left there by fishermen who were washing their nets. And he got into one of the boats, the one belonging to Simon, over here to the left, and he asked him to put it out a little from shore. Then he sat down and taught the people from the boat, and when he had finished speaking, he said to Simon, put out into deep water and let down the nets for a catch. And Simon answered, Master, we've worked hard all night and haven't caught anything, but because you say so, I will let down the nets. And when they had done so, they caught such a large number of fish that their nets began to break. And if you go up in that boat, you'll see a lot of fish in there. And so they signaled their partners in the other boat to come and help them. And they came and filled both boats so that they began to sink. And so when Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord. I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, this is a longer version, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on the shore and they left everything and followed him. And so by the time Jesus stepped into Simon's boat, he had already had a reputation in the area. He had taught in their synagogues, and he even healed Simon's mother-in-law in Luke 4:38 through 39. And Jesus got into Peter's boat here to the left, and he asked him to put out a little ways from shore, in creating like a natural amplification or kind of acoustics, so when Jesus was preaching that his voice would be more amplified so he could teach the people. And so after using Simon's personal boat, he owned it to teach. Jesus wanted to bless him, I believe, for his help. And he told Simon, take the boat into the deeper water and let down the nets. And so he says, "Master, we worked all night and haven't caught anything." And Peter said to Jesus, an experienced fisherman, Peter knew that at nighttime wasn't the best time to fish, since the nets were visible to fish during the day. So he's like, why would I do this during the day? This doesn't make any sense. But when Peter followed Jesus' advice and he let down the nets, he caught so many fish, and you can see in the boat there's a lot of fish in there, that the boats began to sink. And it says in Proverbs 3:9 through 10, "Honor the Lord with your wealth, with the first fruits of all your crops. Then your barns will be filled to overflowing, and your vats will brim over with new wine." And in Luke 6:38 it says, "Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, and running over will be put into your bosom. For with the same measure that you use, it will be measured back to you." I really feel like he was like, I own this boat. I'm going to let Jesus preach on it. And Jesus blessed him back. So Simon was amazed by this huge catch of fish. But something deeper happens here. He fell at Jesus' knees in awe and surrender. And Jesus told Simon not to fear and said he would now fish for people instead of fish, a fisher of men. So this was a turning point for Simon over here, as he chose to fully follow Jesus. And so this dragnet, or this seine, I'm probably butchering, it was an old fishing net, and they were drying them up on the shores here, and I don't have that. But there's a lot of scriptures about fishing nets. And there's one in Matthew 13:47 through 48. It says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a seine net," which I'm probably butchering, "which was spread into the sea and gathered fish of every kind. And when it was full, men drew it ashore and sat down and sorted the good into the vessels, but threw away the bad." And so, so right here we have this scene where these guys leave everything to follow Jesus. And so let's head over to the next scene, and we're going to go into this portal here. We're all going to be on the boat together, so feel free to get close. Behind me. And it says in Mark 4:35 through 41, it says, "That day at evening, Jesus said to his followers, 'Come with me across the lake.' So they left the crowd behind and went with Jesus in the boat he was already in. There were also other boats that went with him. A very bad wind came upon the lake. The waves were coming over the sides and into the boat, and it was almost full of water. And Jesus was inside the boat. He was sleeping with his head on a pillow. And the followers went and woke him, and they said, "Teacher, don't you care about us? We are going to drown." And Jesus stood up and gave a command to the wind and the water, and he said, "Quiet, be still." Then the wind stopped and the lake became calm. He said to the followers, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And they were very afraid, and they asked each other, "What kind of man is this? Even the wind and the water obey him." It's so cool seeing you guys on this boat. I love it. So Peter and Andrew's fishing boat we're on, welcome to it, was about 23 feet long and 7 feet wide. I don't know if I got that right in VR. And with a crew of 4 rowers and 1 steering, it could carry a half a ton of fish, or basically up to 13 people. And there was obviously enough room for Jesus to rest, so don't step on him. He's over there taking a nap. I got sidetracked. And so storms on the Sea of Galilee often, they came without warning, so the crew had to stay alert. And so before this moment that we're on this boat, because we kind of skipped from from Mark to this scene, before this moment on the boat, Jesus taught parables like the sower, the lamp on the stand, and the mustard seed. Teaching from a boat was unusual since most teaching happened in synagogues or familiar places. So when Jesus was preaching on a boat, it was not very common. And so after addressing the crowd, Jesus told his disciples, "Let's go to the other side." He was pretty tired. He had been preaching nonstop, doing ministry. And he was knowing people needed him on the other side. And this journey took Jesus, and that will be the next world build we'll go to the other side, from the Jewish side of the Galilee to the Gentile side, where he later met 2 possessed men, and there's the presence of pigs was there, and that's considered unclean in Jewish law. So not a lot of Jews were hanging out in this Gentile area. And so the trip showed that God's kingdom is for everyone, even if it means stepping out of our comfort zones. And so in verse 37 behind me, I believe it says, "A furious squall came up, and the waves broke over the boat so that it was nearly swamped." So the Sea of Galilee, located in the Jordan Rift, is prone to sudden storms, like I said. There's cool mountain air. It mixes with the warm basin air, and it creates these strong winds. And in March of 1992, a storm brought 10-foot waves into downtown Tiberias, showing how unpredictable and dangerous this lake can be. They just pop up. It's just with the mountains and the altitude and stuff, a storm can just pop up. And so in verse 38, in Crusader for him, and he enables his by Jesus sleeping there, you'll look and you'll see Jesus was in the stern, and he was sleeping on a cushion. And so sleeping through danger can show strong faith, like the psalmist says, "In peace I will lie down, for you alone, Lord, keep me safe," Psalm 4:8. But sometimes it can also mean ignoring the need to act. And this kind of reminds me, if you were in Spatial with us when we did Jonah in the Old Testament, excuse me. And that story highlights the importance of trusting God. Jonah was asleep, much like Jesus, during a storm too, but for a different reason. While the disciples followed Jesus, Jonah was running away from God. God told Jonah to preach to Nineveh, but he refused, thinking they didn't deserve forgiveness. They were bad people. And he boarded a ship heading the opposite direction, running away from God. And so God sent a violent storm. And while the sailors panicked, throwing cargo overboard and praying to their gods, Jonah slept below deck, much like Jesus here. But when the sailors cast lots, it pointed to Jonah. They're like, "Oh, the man of God, you're responsible for this storm." And so Jonah told them, "Throw me overboard to calm the storm." And they're like, "This dude's nuts." And so after trying to row ashore and failing, these sailors, they reluctantly did so. And as they threw Jonah off the side of the boat, the storm stopped instantly, much like Jesus calmed the sea and the scene. And the sailors later worshiped God, thinking Jonah was gone, but God sent a fish to keep him alive for 3 days and nights. In Jonah 1:17. And so Mark's mention, of Jesus sleeping on a cushion shows, I think, his exhaustion from ministry. And it reminds us of his humanity. He came in flesh. He was human, but he also was God. And he's the Lord of the universe, experienced human needs like rest. He wasn't up all night. It wasn't like he was just never slept. He did stuff just like we did. And so even with the waves crashing and the boat filling with water, Jesus slept peacefully in the stern. And though he had told the disciples, he said they'd reach the other side, the storm made them forget his words and they started to lose faith. And so even those who had seen his miracles, they struggled to trust him at that very moment. And so this storm that we're seeing, if you see off in the distance to the behind me, there's another boat. It just has a portal on it. But my point is, and I got lost, there was other boats. The storm just didn't affect this one boat. There was other nearby boats who were caught in it too. So small boats like these that we're in, they filled quickly as the waves crashed over the sides. Let me get back up here. I'm falling off. And so Matthew notes Jesus was asleep. Mark mentions he was in the stern on a cushion, very comfortable. And Luke says he fell asleep as they sailed. And so together, these details paint a picture of Jesus resting calmly during a violent storm. And the Greek word, which I'll probably butcher as like I butcher my Hebrew, leileps, describes this as a whirlwind or tempest. And Mark calls it a megalstorm, an intense, massive, great storm, unlike anything they've faced before. Butchering a lot of Greek there. And so the disciples, they woke him and they said to him, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" And these disciples were tough fishermen. They're used to sudden storms on the Sea of Galilee. But this storm was different. It was so intense, they were terrified. They were about to die, and in desperation, they woke Jesus, asking him if he even cared that they were about to drown as the boat started filling with water. I didn't fill the boat with water, but picture this boat is filling with water, and we're going to sink. And so despite seeing Jesus' miracles, their fear showed they doubted who he really was. And in Matthew, they cry, "Save us, Lord, we are dying." In Matthew 8:25. And in Luke, they shout, "Master, Master, we are dying." And in Mark, their frustration is clear. "Don't you care if we perish?" And so their cries weren't just about fear. They also felt doubt and abandonment. And it's okay to have honest conversations with God. I do it all the time. Even hard ones like, "Don't you care?" I mean, I do it. When we're panic, we often expect others to share in our distress, and if they don't, we accuse them of not caring. We all are going to go through storms and problems. I've been there. And when life storms hit, it can feel like Jesus is distant or not even paying attention. But the truth is, he's right there with us in the middle of it all, just like he's in this boat. And if we all stay in the boat with Jesus and we focus on him, he'll bring peace even in the most chaotic situations. But when we step out of this boat, trying to handle things on our own, the waves of this life will overwhelm us. Without Jesus, this world will overwhelm you. It will pull you into all kinds of crazy stuff. And the struggles can feel like they're pulling us under. So are you in the boat trusting Jesus, or are you out in the waves caught in some rip current in the chaos? As Matthew 7:13-14 says, "Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide, and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter it are many. But the gate is narrow, and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few." So whether he calms the storm immediately or he asks you to trust him as you ride it out, He's with you every step of the way. It's not going to be easy. The disciples spent the entire day learning from Jesus as he explained the deeper meaning of his parables to them. He was speaking in parables because he didn't want to get arrested right away, and so he was doing stuff to the crowd or the Pharisees where they're like, I can't really figure that out. But then he would tell the disciples that's what this meant. But in this storm, they forgot everything he had taught them previously to get in this boat. And so as Joshua 1:9 says, be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And in Proverbs 3:5, it reminds us, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lead not onto your own understanding. And that's a good one because his ways are way higher. I'm not trying to figure out everything he's doing. It looks like I'm falling. So Jesus, in verse 39 behind me, he got up. They cried out to him. He doesn't hesitate. He's not like, hold on, let me go get some bread. Let me, do some errands real quick. He got up. He rebuked the wind and said to the waves, quiet, be still. Then the wind died down. It was completely calm. And so, excuse me, this storm came out of nowhere. With strong winds and huge waves. Like I said, it's filling this boat with water. And the scared disciples woke Jesus, and he got up and he commanded the wind and the sea, peace, be still. And this just wasn't like a calming storm. It was a spiritual battle. Jesus used the same words he used to silence demons, treating this storm as a force threatening his ministry and his disciples. And there's a Greek word, siop, and I said that one correctly, for peace, which means to be silent or mute. And the other word in Greek is pephimoso, for be still, and it means to muzzle. And with this command, Jesus showed his authority over this storm or this principality or whatever it may be. And in the Old Testament, only God is said to control the weather. So all this stuff happens in the ocean. There's a lot of ocean stuff, and so right off the bat, Hebrews are very scared of the ocean. This is a foreign place, a Leviathan, floods. There's all kinds of stuff, so they're already like, who is this person? And in Psalm 89:9 says, you rule over the surging sea. When its waves mount up, you still them. And so the miracle wasn't just that the storm stopped. Storms eventually calm down. I'm going to have a storm tonight. It's going to snow a lot, and it'll eventually, hopefully, melt and calm down. But the miracle wasn't just that the storm stopped. The miracle was how suddenly it happened. One moment the wind roared, the waves crashed, and in an instant, everything became calm. This wasn't like Jesus was like, peace, be still, and then they waited like 30 minutes, had some bread, and they're like, oh, weather looks good. Was that really a miracle? I don't know. I think he did it. It was instant. And the entire lake stilled, leaving the disciples in awe of Jesus' power. And so God can heal in an instant if he wants to. It says in Psalms 32, Lord my God, I called for your help and you healed me. God's power can sometimes work in an instant. And so this storm went from a great windstorm to a great calm. And so other miracle workers, there's a lot of magicians and occult types in the Bible. They could perform some wonders like Jesus. They could cast out demons and do some weird stuff and kind of, do stuff. But only Jesus could command a raging storm to be still. And so they're just like in awe. They're scared. They're not even scared at the storm now. They're scared of Jesus. They're like, who is this person? And as Psalms 93:4 says, the floods have lifted up, O Lord. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their roaring, mightier than the thunders of many waters, mightier than the waves of the sea. The Lord on high is mighty. And so we're almost done. My arm's sore from holding this thing. I feel like I'm like holding a small Bible or something. And so in verse 40, he said to his disciples, why are you so afraid? Do you still have no faith? And so after calming the storm, Jesus turned to the disciples and asked, why are you so afraid? And that Greek word is deilos, and it's meaning timid or fearful. He's like, why are you so timid and fearful? And that word gives us many reasons to have fear. Do you still have no faith? And because faith is a key to overcoming fear. How would the disciples have reacted if their faith had been strong? If they truly knew who Jesus was and his identity and they trusted him, they wouldn't have woken him up. They would have let him rest because they would have believed two things. One, the boat wouldn't sink. It couldn't sink with the master on board, even sleeping. And the storm wouldn't last forever. Faith would have given them peace even in the middle of storm. And so Hebrews 11:6 says, and without faith, it's impossible to please God, because anyone who comes to him must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who earnestly seek him. And so in verse 41, it says they were terrified and they asked each other, who is this? Even the wind and the waves obey him. And so in verse 41, it says they were filled with great fear. Like I said, and they said to one another, who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him? And so that Greek word, it means both fear and reverence. And the disciples experienced two types of fear in this boat: natural fear of the storm, and a fear that was kind of an awe of Jesus who calmed it. They were terrified. And they were also amazed at his power and authority. And so this story moves from a raging storm to complete calm to the disciples being in awe of Jesus. And it's the kind of awe you feel when you see God's power to save. And so despite rejection from many, including religious leaders, Jesus continued his ministry after he calms the storm onto the other side. And that'll be our next world build, showing that his message would not stop. And Jesus demonstrated his power there with miracles by casting out demons. I mean, he cast out the guy that had the legion and the pigs. That's 5,000 demons. That's a whole lot. They were taking over that area, the demonic forces. They basically said it was almost like taming an animal to deal with them. They lived in caves. And he begins to raise Jairus' daughter, and he heals a woman that was sick for 12 years once they get to the other side. And so these acts reveal who he is and what he can do, and that will be the focus of our next Robo message. And come check us out for that one. We'll be going to the other sea for those scenes. But this scripture, I always have some random scriptures at the end. I'm going to go ahead and read this, and I'll read a few things for probably the folks that are watching on YouTube, because I know you guys are all saved. Revelation 22:12 through 17 says, look, I am coming soon. My reward is with me, and I will give to each person according to what they done. I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end. Blessed are those who wash their robes, that they may have the right to the tree of life and may go through the gates into the city. But outside this boat, outside these waters, out in this world, outside are the dogs, those who practice magical arts, the sexually immoral, the murderers, the idolaters, and everyone who loves and practices falsehood. I, Jesus, have sent my angel to give you this testimony for the churches. I am the root and the offspring of David and the bright morning star. The Spirit and the bride say, come, and let the one who hears say, come. Let the one who is thirsty come, and let the one who wishes to take the free gift of the water of life. And so there's typically two groups in this story. Some who don't know Jesus yet. You know, whether that's online with the YouTube deal or in the metaverse somewhere when they come in here and look at this world. And others who are in a storm right now that feel alone and defeated. Like Jesus might be taking a power nap. And so in verse 35, Jesus said, let us go over to the other side. That's what he said to the disciples. He didn't say, let's get in the boat and drown, or let's barely make it. He said, let's go to the other side. And so you're not just invited, you're called to step into this journey of miracles with Jesus. So God's in control, and there is another side, and we're all going to get there at some point. And so he's right there, if you're in the storm, with you in the storm. And so it might be a wild ride. You might not instantly change everything, but you'll come out stronger and full of faith when it's over. I've been through a lot. It's not fun, but you come out and you're just like, you just have more faith and you're more bold. And so there's a second group, and it's probably some people that are watching here on YouTube. Are you even in the boat with Jesus? Or are you outside in the riptide? And when Jesus is on board, there's nothing to fear. And so maybe it's time for them to wake up to see who he really is, just like the disciples, to realize his true identity. And so this is for people watching on YouTube or the stream. Let me lead you in a prayer if you want to know Jesus. It's not a magical prayer. If you believe this in your heart, you will be changed. And you'll have a relationship with him. And it's good to be in a boat when Jesus is in there, because he created everything. He's the creator of you. He created you in his image, and he's got good plans for you. And so repeat this prayer. Jesus, I know I'm a sinner, and I ask for your forgiveness. I believe you died for my sins and you rose from the dead. I turn from my sins, and I invite you to come into my heart and life. I want to trust and follow you as my Lord and Savior. Awesome. Thank you so much. And like I said, our next world build, we will be heading over to the other side of this scene where Jesus casts about 5,000 demons out of the Legion and does all kinds of miracles on the other side on the Gentile side. So appreciate it, guys.